Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here to listening to my talk. By the way, yes, do rate me, because I think when I'm doing a talk, I need like the vicious kind of rating that people give you when they don't look you in the eyes when they actually talk about your work. So please go online and rate my talk. I would really appreciate this, and I'm very okay with vicious comments. Okay, so I'll be talking about the IoT hype. Why do I do that? I'm actually not necessarily an IoT guy yet, I guess. I'm a biologist like Boris, by the way, so maybe biologists tend to get to IoT sooner or later. I got into this whole startup thing and actually 3D printing thing 4 years ago when I went to a startup weekend, founded a company with a couple of friends, and went to Munich because there was money there for us to continue working, and this is where I was dabbling around with the maker movement, and I had friends which were in hackerspaces and would visit them. But this was when I would actually get active, and we had the first maker fair in Germany called Make Munich. I did that 2 years, continued to work on Fabeo, so I kind of got pulled in, absolutely got pulled in into this 3D printing hype, and had to deal a lot with the problems that a hype has. After that, Fabeo unfortunately didn't work, and I worked for another company called Artshapes, and it was also a type of company is 3D printing is cool, we should do something like that, and they had not much more business model, and this is quite typical, I guess, for certain fields, especially if they are hyped up like that. In the meantime, on the maker side of things, we started Munich Maker Lab 2 years ago, the freshest, newest hackerspace in Munich. This is where I could indulge even more in my hobby. And actually, by random, over the Munich Maker Lab channel, I got an offer to do workshops for a conference, for advertising conference called UBX. And they wanted to have maker topics like Arduino and Raspberry and 3D printing. And since while at Fabeo, I was in charge a lot of communication and the maker side of things and the actual 3D printing, I have had a lot of experience with workshops, and I had no problem expanding that on things I hadn't done workshop on yet, but I was interested in anyway. And especially we were supposed to do an installation piece, and it turned out to be kind of IoT, because it was a topic they wished for. It was a Twitter marble run, so everyone who would tweet about the conference, or the hashtag of the conference, a ball would drop down, shoot, and roll around the marble run. Worked very well. Everyone was super happy. It's like a good example how to communicate the connection between virtual and physical world. And during the conception phase, I would dabble around with IoT, and I would read up, do you do the first Google search, and then you hear something like 20 million, 60 million, billions, trillions of devices by 2020 or 2030, or you read about all those great new ideas that you have with IoT, and I was like, I heard that before, the promises and how it will change the world and how this will be the only interesting and important thing that will ever go on in 10 years, 5 years or something. And this piqued my interest, and I wanted to see if it's actually, how similar it is to what I experienced with the 3D printing hype. When you talk about hypes, you will see this one. This is the free version. Of course, usually this is the Gartner hype cycle. They actually coined the term hype cycle. It's not a cycle. It's not very scientific neither, but it kind of captures the intuition that we have about hypes anyway. This is what every one of us has experienced one way or another, perhaps with boy bands in school or something like that. First everyone's super excited and exaggerates absolutely about the possibilities of the theme. Then they notice, then reality kind of catches up, and no one's interested anymore. And the ones that were interested before, or are really truly interested, they just continue working. The technology matures, and then you get to the actual, plateau of productivity where you get mature, usable products, and where it's, no one talks that much about it anymore because it just became normal. So you don't have to hype it. It became part of normal life. The thing with hypes, though, it can be a bit dangerous. I don't know if anyone remembers that one, Second Life. It's like they had a huge hype washing over it, and now it's can tear you down. Luckily, I have a friend which actually was back then, a hipster of Second Life, I guess. She was in it before it was cool, and she still is. And the community is still well and thriving. It's like, it's like a huge wave. Some people manage to dive through. And but it's this whole hype thing is not that new, actually. You can find examples which go back as far back as the 20s, where radioactivity was the shit. And so you would put radioactivity everywhere. So in toothpaste, in chocolate, I could have I think 5 slides with examples where they would put all radium in it, or thorium, or anything radioactive, because it's new, it's cool, it's sparkly, and so it has to be good for you. Well, as we know now, it's not. Maybe you would find something like that similar about smoking, but I didn't have the time to check. Anyway, no one would. What's important about this is why I'm talking about this, besides the joke value, is that no one would deny that radioactivity has changed the world. But still, when you look at the hype, it's like apparently there's no limit to exaggeration at that point. So even if you are in a topic that has a lot of promise, the hype is still dangerous, because you will still have a lot and lots of ideas which just don't make sense. And people apparently lose the ability to distinguish good ideas from bad ones. So how do you spot a hype? Well, nowadays, I don't know how it was in the 20s, but nowadays, this is, I guess, more personal opinion than research. I look for buzzwords. If there are a certain amount of buzzwords, I get, very suspicious about, about the way of people talk about it. It's less fact, it's more, fantasy or wishful thinking. Another thing is like bold predictions, and by bold, I mean like out of thin air, apparently. I remember, Second Life, they said this would be the thing, and you wouldn't be able to sell bread without having a virtual counterpart of your shop in Second Life. Well, as we know now, I don't know if they sell, maybe they sell bread in Second Life, I wouldn't know. And everything has to be that thing. So, in this talk, you will find a couple of examples of things that are IoT now, where it's questionable whether they profit from it. And I noticed that with 3D printing too. It's like my pet peeve would be the 3D printed cup, because we had cups, I guess, in ceramics would be BC. So I didn't really see how we would need 3D printed cups, but this was the example that stuck. And yeah. And but how do you handle it? So when I look at ideas from IoT, how do I try to distinguish the good ones from bad ones, especially with limited information, because it is new, that's true. So I try to play word games. I don't know if some of you know the game Taboo. It's like you have to explain a word, and you have to leave out like the 5 most useful words, or the most common words you use to describe it, and then you have to work around it. And I find it's a very good, it's very helpful if you just leave out the buzzwords and try to rephrase the idea, and if it still makes sense, and very often it doesn't, then it might be something to look at. Very similar to imagine in, I don't know, 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, no one will want to hear anything about IoT anymore. It's like either it's normal by then, and so you don't have to talk about it, or people have been so overpromised that they immediately lose interest when you hear the word IoT. And 3D printing is starting a bit to be like that, like in certain circles. So if you have a good idea, you might want to avoid 3D printing. You still get looks on trade fairs and stuff like that. But if you talk to people who actually want to put their money where their mouth is, then they might get shy when it comes to 3D printing. So are you able to explain the idea without using the buzzword, the hype word? So is it still a good idea when you don't mention IoT in this example or 3D printing? And if it is, then it might have value, and it might be an idea that survives the hype. So, what are the promises of IoT? There are tons and tons of, when I did research for this talk, tons of promises, but I feel it kind of boiled down to 2 points. First is interconnectivity, so that you are able to access your stuff from wherever you are, and your stuff is able to access you, and that you have a smart interaction of those devices which make your life more convenient or helpful, and generally help you getting through your day more smoothly, at least on the customer side. And well, but what is the actual definition? This is from the ITU. Feel free to read it. It's, I tried, you noticed I tried to make slide with a lot of pictures so that it's not so heavy. This is the exception for good reason, to emphasize that this is exactly what this definition is. It's heavy, it's not really useful. And also in biology, you sometimes learn that definitions are actually the hardest part. There are like at least 6 different definitions for life, which don't work. None of them actually covers all of life. So this might be the hard point, and maybe it's easier if you try to look what's adjacent to this technology and just look what it is and what's not. So what you will often find that people will throw it all together. So they will, actually, my girlfriend sent me a startup newspaper or something, or a magazine, which was about IoT, and they had like the 7 most interesting IoT ideas. 3 of them were not IoT, and 2 of them were IoT was not the point. So it was quantified self or home automation, and you could use the internet if you wanted to, but actually you didn't have to for the idea to work. So this is like the typical confusion that you will find. And while they all can interact, so you will have like home automations, you have your devices in your home interacting with each other and doing chores for you that you would have to do yourself usually. And of course, it can be useful if you go into the internet, so you can access it when you're not there, but it's not necessary for every idea. Same goes for quantified self, where it's about quantifying your behavior and your bodily functions, let's say. And you will find a lot of examples where you will, I don't know, have an analysis of your data on the internet, or where you can interact with different quantified self devices, but a quantified self device doesn't have to be an Internet of Things device. And same goes with wearables. Just because you wear it on your body, it can be a wearable device that doesn't go into the internet, it doesn't work with your home. It's not about measuring your body. Well, I guess this one might be one wearable that doesn't fall in any other category and is quite useful. So what does IoT look like in, let's say, the makersphere? Because the makers have been doing stuff that today would be called IoTs long before the word actually existed. Again, Munich's finest makerspace. Everyone's invited. Very nice place to be. Actually, I blurred it. No, I think it's just the blur that I made on the faces for privacy reasons. No one has a hat. It's just, yeah. Anyway, so, no? You don't want any more? What's up? Here we go. So it starts with the LED status, where you will switch a switch, and then you will see a status on the chat. It goes over an MQTT broker, and it will switch on the light, and it doesn't put on music yet, but it sometimes, well, it changes every week actually, but it will interact with a lot of parts of the space, and the bot will look something like that, so you have an integration of the chat with the fridge, and it's a good example of how sometimes it looks. People do it for a hobby because they just add on and add on and add on, and there's no part where they would actually do some designing or something. So it's quite a mess. A lot of fun, but of course it's not a realistic way to build products. But they had this attitude a long time ago, so I did a bit of digging, and those are the first 2 confirmed IoT examples. The one would be the first IoT machine was actually a web-activated toaster, and the other one was a webcam telling people at university when the coffee was empty. The second is when they actually switched it off after, I think, 10 to 20 years or something. So it's been around for a while, but now business has become interested in it. And so the question is, we heard the promises, we looked at what it can look like if you do it for fun, but what's actually happening now? Well, to put it in one sentence, I found that the big business at the moment is either fighting each other or putting out stuff that no one really needs. So it's more at the moment, It's more Internet of Meh. So you have like different gadgets, which kind of are IoT, and you could interconnect them, but you have this whole experience where you actually everything comes together to a holistic approach, where you have different sensors which will interact and will give rise to new, interesting ways of solving problems. I don't see that happening. And what I see happening a lot is, you get into the negatives pretty quickly. This is a nice quote I found. This actually I will read. Welcome to prototype world, a brief intermission in your regularly scheduled program of disruption during which everything will more or less stink. And I feel like especially the appliance makers are selling stuff as an experiment, apparently. And they're just doing new shit because stuff is new. And why do I have this example? This is actually a true story. I was working on my talk doing pancakes, making pancakes. So I was using a scale. We have a digital one for weighing all the ingredients. And I was actually thinking about novelty for novelty's sake, about this very slide. And I had a great idea. I had to write it off for 5 minutes. And of course, the digital scale works with batteries, so it goes into sleep mode. I lose my measurement and I have to start over again. Got super, this maybe is the reason why I have like a little bit pissed off tone, at this moment. This might be very well the reason why. And this is a good example because you have a normal old school scale wouldn't have had that problem. You don't lose the measurement. It's not that the digital scale is so cheap that now everyone can afford a scale. Everyone had scales before the digital scale came along. They're not very more, maybe they're more exact, but you don't really need it in a kitchen. It's like you don't need like parts of grams. So it's just new because it's new and because you have to sell new stuff. But it's worse than it was before. So this is actually I'm not meaning to criticize IoT as itself, which is a great idea. It's just the way to approach it that is actually, this might very well be the reason why you have those hype cycle where people get very disappointed, because if it's this kind of novelty that you get, I kind of understand that people get tired about very quickly. Yeah, of course, the fridge. Apparently, this is kind of an IoT running gag, how I found out. It's like they're trying to push, I think in 2001, they're trying to push internet-connected fridges on people. It doesn't work. It's not really useful. And they did so recently. And actually with the fridge, this was actually why I lost my scale measurement, because I remembered that there was a time where everything would have to have a digital clock or a radio. And you can actually, if you look at the fridge, I don't know, I guess more than 100 of years old, you'll find the plain normal fridge. Then at some point it had to have a radio. Today, almost no fridge has a radio because you don't need a radio. But today you have like Internet of Things connection, so to your Google calendars. And I guess we will at some point come back to fridges that are just cold, because it's actually everything we want from them. We want them to be cold and store our food. And the additional functionality is, it's like, it has bling bling value. But in the end, do we really need a fridge that locks onto our Google calendars? I feel not. Some people might like it, and I would be neutral about this if it wouldn't bring a lot of promise with it. So, patching stuff, updating stuff has become part of our normal life. We kind of had to get used to it, to patch our phones, our computers, our tablets, our routers, and now our TVs, our fridges, our shoes, our vegetables, and if there is actually no added value to it, it's just a lot of hassle, actually. So those are actually fun examples I found. This is a case, well, it's half tragic, half fun. It's actually a very gruesome road accident where a father and his non-born child was killed. And during the funeral, where they wanted to show a commemorative video, they started blasting hardcore porn. And no one knows where that came from. The other one is the Nest is supposed to be like this internet thermostat by Google, or they bought by Google. It's actually quite recent, beginning of the year. I read more articles about it, that they pushed an update that was so big that it actually drained the whole battery. So when people come home, not only was the home not warm, they couldn't switch on the heating. So it's actually another example how it just gets shittier by putting Internet of Things in it, which again is a travesty because Internet of Things is a great idea. Same goes with the Google Calendar fridge. Google changed the API, no Google Calendar anymore, so it's basically a screen. And we have screens, they're called tablets, and I guess you could just pin your tablet on your fridge and you would have pretty much the same functionality without having to. And I guess if you'd add up how much a fridge costs and how much a tablet costs, I guess it's less than the Samsung fridge costs. Well, this one is actually an LG because it was common on the Creative Commons, but yeah, pretty much the same idea. And of course, this is annoying, and now we get into actually relevant territory. We got security relevant. So I don't know, some of you might have heard about this hack of a connected car where they actually were able to, I think, to take out the transmission while driving on the highway. And I think they claimed that they're able to use the brakes and windshield and everything else. So this is where it gets really dangerous too. The thing is, well, this, actually I'm not necessarily a fan of stories that will always cover the next most dangerous thing, because there are many ways to die, and there are many ways to kill people. Okay, we have one more, but if you look at the criminal statistics, actually people get less and less killed, so it might not be that relevant, but still, you're opening up a lot of new venues for security risk, and there's actually a search engine called shodan.io, where you can look for open Internet of Things devices. And open means that you can actually access them. And this is a nanny cam. So actually something that is used to protect children is actually becoming a vector for attacks from the most gruesome sort of people imaginable. And this is actually medical data. This is some radiology lab somewhere in Sao Paulo, I think, where you can see the skull of someone just over the internet. And of course, after Snowden, we learned that the secret services, the Five Eyes, are spying all the mobile communication. And you might think of it what you want, but the question is, do we really want to give them so much more angles to survey us from? Especially if you don't have any added value. So basically, yeah, it might be fun to have an internet fridge and maybe it has a webcam that photographs your food, but everything is a sensor. No matter how small, if it reports outside and it reports to someone that you don't have control of it, maybe to some of the big appliances makers, then it's out of your hand. It can be used to survey yourself. And those are just things that we have to keep in mind. And it seems like security is like one of the least concerns to appliance makers, of course, because they have no experience with it. If you build fridges, what do you know about security? You know probably security is how doors should shut, or that they should stand so that when the kid runs against the fridge, it doesn't fall on its head or stuff like that. But cybersecurity is becoming more and more important and should be emphasized way more for Internet of Things to be something that we can all enjoy. And it even gets, as far as ethics, it gets very interesting. I heard a talk about the Security Nightmares talk of the Chaos Communication Congress, where they talked about the new ethical problems and liabilities that come with Internet of Things devices that are not thought through. This is the Hello Barbie. It's connected over wireless to the internet to speech recognition, and it's supposed to talk with the child and to actually remember what the child is saying, reacting to the conversation so that it emulates real conversation. So if you look into the agreements, the user agreements of speech recognition, they always say that as soon as someone speaks and the speech recognition is switched on, data can and will be logged. So you as storages, you have someone listening on your kids now after the nanny cam that is watching your kids. And this normal security concerns, but what happens, I was always talking from the point of view that it's dangerous for the users, but it can be also a problem for the vendors. What happens, for example, if Hello Barbie is listening in on abuse? Are they liable? Do they have to help? They have the possibility to actually understand what's happening. This is the whole point of the Barbie, that she understands the context and reacts to the things that the kid asks. So we might have, with the Hello Barbie, we might have the problem that in 20 years, kids or grown-ups will will start suing the toy companies, telling them, you knew that I was being abused and you did nothing. You knew, or maybe you should have known. And so this is like, they're opening a whole can of worms, and this happy-go-lucky, we're building everything into everything approach might not cut it for stuff that is relevant like that. So, it doesn't have to be a sad talk. There are also a lot of interesting things about the Internet of Things. For example, this is a very nice maker project that I found called Homey. It's a hub for your home, and this is the typical, what I like about maker projects. This is someone who had a problem and went on to solve it so well that other people wanted it too. So he focused absolutely on openness and interconnectivity. So I think it had like 7 different radio devices, because he had the problem that is the problem at the moment with IoT. He had a lot of different gadgets that he liked, but he was not really able to connect them because they all speak a different language. They all use a different platform, and this is Homey, and the whole idea behind it is that it's open source, so you can take the Homey and build new functionalities in it, and that it's interconnectable with as many devices as possible. So that it's absolutely agnostic. This is Park Pocket, actually solving a problem. There are several companies which go in this direction. The idea is that you use Internet of Things, actually sensors in the inner city to distribute parking space. And in this case, they use, there's also a big data approach, so they take a lot of data from the city and from the parking companies, which are, of course, interested in having more efficient processes, and give it to their customers so that they find the cheapest, nearest available parking space. And when you think that in inner cities, up to 40% of all the traffic is just because people look for a parking space, this might be actually environmentally relevant. What I especially like about this idea, they're pushing the data from the companies to the customers. They're not spying on, they're going this way around, it's nice, they're not harvesting data from their customers. And there are even things that might be relevant for the world in general. I don't know if you heard about the collapse disorder. It's weird that people don't freak out about this more. Bees are going extinct at the moment. It's not really understood why, but 90% of all the crops that humans eat are pollinated by bees, so that's a big one. And this is an Internet of Things approach where you can build compostable sensors into the hive, and they would detect a specific point in the life cycle of bee larvae. And this is the time where the pods get closed. And this is when the varroa mites, which are also responsible for the strain on bee colonies, which lead to the collapse. This is when they lay their eggs. And when you apply heat at that moment, the eggs will be sterilized before they're fertilized by the male mites. And the pupae tolerate a couple of degrees more than the mite eggs. And so you have a non-invasive, non-chemical way to treat a very, very dangerous diseases for bees and for us as a consequence. There have been other solutions which went in this direction, which promised that they would get rid of the mites, but if it worked, it would be a big one. The other one is an open energy monitor, open source project, which helps you with, or which monitors all the energy flux in your home or company or wherever. Also very interesting to actually know where the energy is going and where it's coming from. So the idea behind it is that if you have like solar panels or different influxes of energy and different energy drains, that you can monitor them and make it more efficient. What's interesting is, well, again, it's open source, so you can expand it however you like, and they use it in the intranet. So the devices are connected with each other, but they won't communicate with the internet if it's. They will only communicate with the internet if it's absolutely necessary, meaning that this a big security concern. Attacks from the internet are way easier to handle because you don't have every device going on the internet doing whatever. So, as I said, we have a lot of problems. We have a lot of problems. We have a lot of interesting ideas in the IoT, but if home automation seems to be the battlefield, the chosen battlefield for customer IoT, and why is it not coming together? And the main reason I identified is there are just too many platforms. This is just the 6 biggest, I think, but I think it's over 20 or 30 different platforms that you can use to do IoT, and some of them do home automation. And this is Apple's HomeKit. This is Samsung's Arctic. Brillo is from Google. Mbed is from ARM. AllJoyn is from Qualcomm, but is supported also by Microsoft. And IoTivity by Intel. So you have a lot of big players which will fight it out. And I think 3 or 4 of them are beyond the 10 biggest companies of the world. So they have the money and the resources to fight for a long time. And this might very well postpone our nice new IoT experience for, okay, I said something about bold claims in talks. So allow me one bold claim. I think this might very well postpone the nice IoT world that we talk about so much by 10 or 20 years until they finally fought it out. Because IoT won't be fun at all before you can actually plug in the devices together that you like and don't have to look about compatibilities, and you can't use the Apple devices with the Google device, with the Samsung device, with the Intel devices. This is no fun at all. And so if we want to have this holistic IoT experience come together, this fight will have to be fought. And as a second conclusion, maybe we don't need IoT in everything. Well, that is from me. I hope you enjoyed the talk. How am I with time?
We still got 8 minutes left, so there's time
Okay.
for questions.
Then, thanks for listening, and go ahead and ask.
So what did you automate at home? What did you automate at home?
Not a thing, actually. I haven't seen anything so far. The thing I will probably automate next, I live with my flatmates, and everyone is welcome to steal the idea, would be a home automation platform that will support the communication needs that you have in shared flats. For example, one example would be someone empties the fridge, or someone is outside and would go shopping, and someone knows what's missing in the kitchen. And usually it's not just a picture of a fridge won't do it. So it's just, the kitchen is big, you have like 4 people, in my case, 4 people, 4.5, as many people are going in and out in our flat. So someone knows what's missing. At least part, all the knowledge is distributed, let's say, and it would be nice if it would come together somewhere, and if I could just, I don't want to call, sometimes someone's home, so if I could whip out my smartphone and it's like, hey, get milk, or toilet paper is getting dangerously low, this would be awesome.
But this is Internet of People, not Internet of Things.
Well, you need a hub, and you would need to, and it would be nice if because we do a lot about with Facebook chat, lots of the communication, and I noticed that different flats use different channels, but it's all, it's all spread out, and there's a good reason why you would aggregate that in a specific flat, because,
I want to automatize the next to the fridge, which LG is already doing, so we can actually text
yeah, but it's not the
the fridge and it tells you if there's any.
thing is, when you live in a shared flat, if it were only the fridge, I might agree. But the thing is, like, everyone more or less knows what belongs where. But it still will happen that you think that there's no rice because, of course, it goes with the cereals. But someone put it with the potatoes because it's ground food. So someone will know that there's rice. But it's not necessarily that the rice is where it's supposed to be. So you can, and on top of that, fridges in shared flats usually are a huge mess. So if you want to build an intelligent system that's useful in that case, then something that will sort out all this mess, that somehow will compartmentalize so that you will find the stuff and somehow it's more cleaned up. I think a picture won't do it, because then you will have, the front, which will be maybe because someone just bought a lot of vegetables, will be vegetable stock in front of everything. and this tool still won't tell you where the butter is.
Are there some attempts to kind of build an open protocol for this kind of stuff?
Some of them, actually, some of those protocols are open. They're not all closed. Actually, the only one that's really closed source, as far as I know, but correct me if I'm wrong. There are guys in this room which know better, and so they should contradict me if I'm telling stupid things. In general, by the way, general rule. Also in the talk, that's not true. HomeKit, as far as I know, from Apple, is the only one that is absolutely closed off. AllJoin, which is supported by Microsoft, is, as far as I know, absolutely open source. It's actually supported by the Linux Foundation, which was a huge surprise for me. And it's really weird. It's just as a side note, Microsoft is also supporting 3MF, which is an open source, an open standard for 3D printing. And I switched to Linux because I was so fed up with Linux, with Windows and all those proprietary nonsense and all those wall-in that they were trying to do, and maybe they learned the lesson. Who knows? Yeah. And I think IOTivity is open too. It's like, I think AllJoin is like a fork of IOTivity, or a splinter fraction or something. The thing is, I only put up the platforms because this is easy to explain, but there's also a problem that they all also have different formats. And I'm not anywhere near enough into this topic to be talking about that. And I think this is also where lots of the complexity comes from, because it's not only that, of course, you can look into all the source, but if they talk different languages, So, and as I said, I just started recently really dabbling into IoT, so this is to learn list how all the formats actually work.
If there's no more questions, then there's great to you as well. Thank you very much for taking the talk.
Yeah. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thank you for the questions too.